she has lived all over from Alaska to Hawaii to Saipan, which is close to China, all over. So that's my wife. We got married in July of 22, and we had our firstborn in July of 23, and then July of 24. Now we're looking to move a little closer to family because of the baby. So this morning, I asked the men who I interviewed with over Zoom, I asked them for some assigned topics because one of the challenges of going to visiting a new congregation is not knowing what the congregation needs to hear. And so my assigned topic today is standing strong during discouraging times like Joseph. What's discouragement? I like a lot of feedback in my classes. So anybody know what discouragement is? Yeah, loss of hope. Yeah, that's a good way of describing it. Anyone else? Disappointment. Yep. You know, my mind, whenever I started thinking of, a definition of discouragement, rather than going to Google or rather than going to Merriam-Webster, I thought, discouragement is the opposite of encouragement, And so then I thought, well, what is encouragement? And my mind painted this picture. You've got a racer running a race, and an encourager on the sideline might be encouraging him, say, you can finish, you can complete the race, you can keep going, it's not that far. And then what would a discourager be saying to him? Stop, give up, you can't do it, you're not good enough, just go home, you're not going to make it. Right? So that's what a discourager is one who encourages failure. Right? Joseph is a perfect example of one who faced discouragement on all sides. Everyone wanted him to fail, except for God above. Everyone wanted Joseph to fail. We're going to look at this morning, if time permits us, that Joseph had a discouraging home life. Joseph had a discouraging society. He lived in a discouraging society. And third, Joseph had a discouraging religion. And hopefully, as Hebrews 12 and verse 1 suggests, hopefully when we start studying about these men who went through these trials such as we are encouraged to do as they did. Joseph suffered discouragement, but what did Joseph do in the end? He remained what? He remained faithful, right? As the title suggests, he stood strong, right? Despite the discouragement, he stood strong. So we're going to notice several things about Joseph, and we'll see that Joseph's got a pretty hard life. Some things each one of us can probably identify with. All right. Point number one, Joseph had a discouraging home life. Specifically, he had bad grandparents. All right, we're starting before Joseph's even born to look at Joseph. I like to have people read Bible verses. I don't know names, so I'm just going to point and ask. If you don't want to read, you just say, I don't want to read. But that's how I like to run my class. So would you mind reading Genesis 26, 34, and 35? And would you mind reading Genesis 27, 6 through 10? And would you mind reading, Audrey? Yeah. Genesis 27, 42 through 43. Genesis 27, 42 and 43. Yeah. And what's your name? Kristen. And what's your name? Nancy. Kristen, Nancy. I like to memorize as many names as I can. Genesis 26, 34, and 35. Go ahead, whenever you get there.
When Esau was 40 years old, he took his wives, Judith the daughter of Beeri the Hittite, and Basemath the daughter of Elon the Hittite, and they were a grief of mine to Isaac and Rebekah.
All right, here is where we get the first thorn in the flesh of Joseph's life. Esau, Joseph's uncle, marries who? How many? 2 wives. And how does Joseph's grandparents react? They were a grief of heart. Yeah. So from then on, evidently, Rebekah has a vendetta against her own son. All right, this is the first straw on the camel's back for Joseph. This is what's going to start setting in motion a lot of Joseph's life. This is going to directly play into Joseph's even conception. All right. Genesis 27, 6 through 10 there. I forgot it. Yeah, it's Nancy, yeah.
So Rebekah spoke to Jacob, her son, saying, Indeed, I heard your shall take it to your father that he may eat it, and that he may bless you before his death.
Okay, this is a passage that most of us are familiar with. Jacob and Esau. Esau's the eldest. Esau's supposed to get the birthright and the blessing. Jacob's already swindled Esau out of the birthright. Now he's swindling him out of the blessing to carry the seed that would eventually produce the Messiah. And what does Mama Rebecca do for Jacob? She doesn't like Esau, so what does she do? She sets Jacob up for the blessing. She says, you just pretend to be Esau, and you're going to go get the blessing. And all right, most of the time in 2024, poor old ladies, they are the ones scammed. Here we have Grandma Rebecca. She's the one doing the scamming. Anybody in here a scammer like Rebecca? Don't answer that question. All right. So Rebecca, she is scamming Isaac and Esau and getting the inheritance for Jacob instead. Well, Jacob is going to end up getting the inheritance, and Esau's not going to like that too much. He's going to decide that he wants to kill his brother Jacob. And Audrey, could you read Genesis 27, 42, and 43?
But the words of Esau, her older son, were told to Rebekah. So she sent and called Jacob, her younger son, and said to him, behold, your brother Esau comforts himself about you and wanting to kill you. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice. Arise, flee to Laban, my brother, in Haran.
All right, so Esau wants to kill Jacob. Rebekah says, Jacob, you need to go and spend some time with my brother, Laban, and that's exactly what he does. He goes up to Padan Aram there in that verse. He goes up to Padan Aram, and he spends a number of years up with Laban. And that brings us to the second grandparent of Joseph's life. That's right. Joseph's great uncle is also his grandpa, right? You've probably heard of the song, I'm my own grandpa. Well, that's, that's about the same in Joseph's life. Joseph's parents, Jacob and Rachel, were first cousins. So there's a little bit of inbreeding there in Joseph's life. So Jacob goes up to Padan Aram. He meets his lovely bride Rachel, and of course we most of us are probably familiar with the story where he ends up marrying Leah and Rachel, and then he has children with their maidservants Bilhah and Zilpah as well, and that's all not too good. Let's have a few more verses read. Let's see. Could you read, do you want to read? Could you read Genesis chapter 30, verses 22 through 24? And could you read the next verse, 25, Genesis 30, 25? And could you read 2 verses later, Genesis 30 and verse 27? All right. And Paul, could you read Genesis 31, 7? Genesis 31, 7. And Viola, would you like to read? No, you don't want to. That's fine. Would you like to read? Could you read Genesis 31, 14, and 15? Yeah. And one more, just for good measure. Would you like to read? Genesis 31, 25 through 28. Genesis 31, 25 through 28. Okay. So now we're looking at Joseph's second grandparent, which is Laban. Okay. This is his grandpa. Let's start in Genesis 30, verses 22 through 24.
Then God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her and opened her womb. She conceived and bore a son, and said, God has taken away my reproach. And she called his name Joseph, saying, May the Lord add to me another son.
All right, so Jacob has already had 10 children, 10 sons, and 1 daughter. And now he's had a son from his favorite wife, Rachel. And now that he has had a son from his favorite wife, it is time to pack up and go back home. He's got everything that he wants, so now it's time to go back home. Genesis 30, 25.
Now it came about when Rachel had borne Joseph that Jacob said to Laban, send me away that I may go to my own place and to my own country.
Time to go home. Genesis 30, verse 27.
And Laban said to him, please stay, if I have found favor in your eyes, for I have learned by experience that the Lord has blessed me for your sake.
Okay, this is a reasonable request on Laban's part. Laban says, God has blessed me whenever you've been serving me. I'd like for you to say, could you please stay, Jacob? And, Jacob stays for a while, and there's a whole context there that we're skipping over for time's sake. Genesis 31, verse 7, but Paul...
And your father hath deceived me and changed my wages 10 times, but God suffered him not to hurt me.
All right, so Jacob stays there a little bit. Right there in that context, he's having a conversation with his two wives, Leah and Rachel, and he's saying, you know what, it is time to leave, ladies, because your father has changed my wages 10 times. He's trying to make me stay. He's trying to trick me into staying. And so he asks reasonably, then he tries to trick his son-in-law into staying. Genesis 31, 14 through 15. All right. The ladies respond to Jacob there. He says, oh, yeah, we've become victim of him as well. It's so bad that he has stolen all of our money to make us more dependent on him. So here we have a man who is asking reasonably, then tricking, and then stealing in order to get his family to stay with him. Okay, that's not a very good father-in-law, is it? All right. Genesis 31, 25 through 28 now.
Then Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the mount, and Laban with his brethren pitched in the mount of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, what hast thou done, that thou hast stolen away unawares to me, and carried away my daughters as captives, taken with the sword? Wherefore didst thou flee away secretly, and steal away from me, and didst not tell me, that I may have sent thee away with mirth, and with songs, and tabret, and harp? And hast not suffered me to kiss my sons and my daughters, thou hast now done evil.
Okay, so we have a real good example of what a toxic parent looks like here. Laban, after Jacob and his family leaves in the middle of the night, Laban follows them, and when he meets up with them, he says, why would you leave? I wanted to honor you. I wanted to throw a party for you. Why would you leave? Have you ever experienced something where someone makes your life miserable and then later on they blame you for your life being miserable? Has anyone ever had that? That's what a toxic person does. A toxic person makes your life miserable, then blames you for your life being miserable. Poor Joseph. Before he's even born, he's maybe a toddler at this point, maybe 1 or 2 years old. Before Joseph even has a chance, he's already been born into a bad family. Bad grandma who's willing to scam to get what she wants. Bad grandpa who's willing to trick and steal and blame in order to get what he wants. Whew. What discouragement Joseph has before he's even got a chance. Okay, so Joseph's got bad grandparents. Joseph also has bad parents. We've already seen that. Jacob, whenever Rebekah came to Jacob and said, hey, you can swindle your brother out of his inheritance, out of his blessing, what did Jacob do?
Let's do it.
Tell me, Mom. I'm ready for it. Yeah, let's do it. Right? So, Jacob's pretty bad too. And his mom's also fairly bad. Let's have another passage read. Let's see. Sir, could you read Genesis 31, 34 through 35? Would you mind reading? Yeah. Genesis 31, 34 through 35.
Now Rachel had taken the household idols and put them in the camel's saddle, and she sat on them, and Laban filled through all the tent, but did not find them. She said to her father, let not my lord be angry, that I cannot rise before you, for the manner of woman is upon me. So he searched, but did not find the household idols.
Okay, so we have two faults here in the same passage of Rachel. Rachel, whenever they up and leave in the middle of the night, Rachel steals what? The idols. Okay, so there's two problems here. First, she steals, and then she She stole idols. She's an idolater. She's a pagan. Right? Two faults there. Poor Joseph. Poor Joseph. Before he's even got a chance, he's already born into such discouragement, such hardship. All right, so he's got bad grandparents. He's got bad parents, and this is what we most notice him for. He's got bad siblings too. Why do Joseph's siblings hate him? Why are they jealous? Why is he the favorite? Yeah, he's Rachel's. All right, and beyond that, he's the favorite because Jacob said he's going to be the favorite. Jacob's a bad dad. All right, not only is he playing favorites, but he's also sleeping with women besides Joseph's mother, right? Of course, he's married to some of them, but that's still going to create a lot of jealousy. That's going to create a lot of hardship within the home, right? So Jacob, he's a bad dad, and that has been pushed onto, it's been adopted by 10 of the 11 brothers, right? So Joseph's got bad siblings. What all do they do to Joseph? One day they see Joseph coming to check in on them, and they say, "Behold, this dreamer is coming. What are we going to do with him?" They threw him in the pit. They first decide that they're going to kill him. Then they decide, well, let's throw him in the pit first. And then while he's sitting in the pit, what do they decide? Oh, here's some Ishmaelites coming down the road. What should we do? Yeah, how shall we make gain from this? Let's sell him into slavery. So they decide they're going to kill him, and they don't. That's the best thing that they do. Throw him into the pit. They detain him. Then they sell him into slavery. And then what? What do they do with the coat? Yeah, they shred it to pieces and dip it in blood to make it look like he's been killed. Bad brothers. Real bad brothers. Whew. Do you think Joseph had a bad home life? A little bit. You never really pick up on that, or a lot of us really don't notice that whenever we're reading it. Bad grandparents, bad parents, bad siblings. Man. If anybody had the excuse to be a bad person, who was it? Probably Joseph. What does Joseph do once he gets down to Egypt? He gets sold to another fellow, a fellow named Potiphar, and what happens? Where does he rise to? Second in command, only under Potiphar, right? So he's still doing pretty good for himself, though he's been sold into slavery. Now he's a slave. And point number 2 this morning: Joseph is a victim of a bad society, a discouraging society. He's got also bad co-workers, right? Joseph was a victim of sexual harassment in the workplace. Did you know that? Yeah, Joseph is a victim of sexual harassment in the workplace. What happens? Potiphar's wife does what? Every day. Lie with me, lie with me, lie with me, lie with me. Every day. Now, he's not just a victim once, he's a victim daily. You think Joseph suffered discouragement? And what does Joseph do every time that he's harassed? How can I do this great sin before God? Potiphar's made me this house. He's only restrained one thing from me, kept one thing from me. What was it? You. I'm not going to sin. And because of his good doing, because he remained chaste, what happened? Yeah, he's framed for attempted rape and imprisoned. Whew. Anybody here ever been a victim of harassment, sexual or otherwise? Don't raise your hand. Joseph was. And did it get better for him? It got worse for him at first. Thrown into prison. Man, bad coworkers. Really bad coworkers. He's also, once he gets into prison, he's got bad neighbors. We're going to backtrack a little bit. Let's focus on those Ishmaelites first whenever we're considering bad neighbors. Who's Ishmael?
The son that Abraham.
Yeah, firstborn of Abraham. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That he tried to scheme to have.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yep. Firstborn of Abraham with Hagar, the maidservant. That's right. So the son out of wedlock. And Ishmael establishes his own little nation, and we're not too far removed from Ishmael whenever Joseph comes along. Ishmael would have been Joseph's great uncle, right? Right there in the same generation as his grandparents, Laban, Rebekah, and Ishmael and Isaac. They're all in the same generation. So we're not too far removed from that generation. And of course, they would have been right next door neighbors as a nation. So here we have the Ishmaelites coming down the road, and they see these 10 brothers. Do you think they recognize them? There's a chance. Oh, this is Isaac's grandchildren. Oh, these are Jacob's boys. Oh, they're wanting to sell one of their brothers. Man, you picture that for a moment. Your own family not only selling you into slavery, but buying you into slavery. That's worst case scenario, is that they recognize them. What's best case scenario? That's right. They didn't, but they see these 10 older brothers look like this, maybe 12-year-old boy. I don't know how old Joseph was at the time, but let's assume 12, right? And they say, oh yeah, we'll purchase him. And then once Joseph gets in the cart, what do you think Joseph starts talking to them about? Please take me home. Man. Kids constantly need help in situations like that, and constantly adults just ignore them. Here we have the Ishmaelites just ignoring them. Bad neighbors. Really bad neighbors. Man. If anyone had the excuse to be a terrible human being, who was it? Joseph. Okay, another bad neighbor. Joseph gets thrown into prison, right? And whenever he's in prison, he meets these two fellows, a butler and a baker. Anybody remember these stories? The butler, he says, or the butler and the baker, they both have dreams. And Joseph starts talking to them, and he starts interpreting the dreams. That's sort of Joseph's shtick, is God has blessed him with the ability to have dreams and interpret dreams. And so these two fellows, they have a divine dream from God, and Joseph tells the baker, all right, 3 days you're going to die. 3 days, in 3 days it's going to be Pharaoh's birthday and you're going to die. And to the butler, Joseph says what? In 3 days you're going to what? You're going to be restored. You're going to be returned. You're going to get out of prison. You're going to be returned to the butler position of Pharaoh. And there's just one condition that Joseph asks for. He says, butler, when you're restored, please remember me. Please don't leave me here in prison. What do you think happened? For 2 years. For 2 years, Joseph sat in prison because he had a bad neighbor who forgot him. If anyone had the right to be angry at the world, it was Joseph. Okay. Joseph rose to second in command over Potiphar's house. Guess what happened when Joseph was in prison? Second in command over prison. That's an important thing to remember as we study Joseph, is that God is always with him, though it looks like he's not. Though it sometimes looks like God's not. God is always with Joseph. Let's all together open on our Bibles to Genesis chapter 40. Genesis chapter 40. Genesis chapter 40, we're going to begin in verse 23. This is right after the butler's restored. Genesis chapter 40, let's back up to verse 20. Genesis 40, verse 20. Now it came to pass on the third day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast for all his servants. And he lifted up the head of the chief butler and of the chief baker among his servants. Then he restored the chief butler to his butlership again, and he replaced the cup in Pharaoh's hand, but he hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet the chief butler did not remember Joseph and forgot him. That's not what I wanted. Anyway, what I'm looking for is there's a passage somewhere right after these events happen where it says, God did not forget Joseph. God never forgot Joseph. Let's see. Back up to Genesis 39. I was one chapter off. Genesis 39, same verse, verse 20. Genesis 39, verse 20. This is right after Joseph has been imprisoned. Joseph's master took him, put him into prison, a place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in the prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed mercy. And he gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever they did, it was his doing. The keeper of the prison did not look into anything that was under Joseph's authority, because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper. Why do you think Moses, who wrote Genesis, included 3 times here, the Lord was with Joseph? Joseph's just been in prison. What do you think is going through Joseph's mind at this time? I have been sold into slavery. I have been framed for attempted rape. I am now in prison. What do you think is going through Joseph's mind? My God, why hast thou forsaken me? Probably. Wouldn't that go through your mind too? And what does the author of Genesis, the writer of Genesis, remind us of here? Has God forsaken Joseph? No. Sometimes it looks like God forsakes us. Does God forsake us? No. Where did Joseph wind up? Second in command over Potiphar's house, and then second in command over the prison. Bad neighbors. Bad coworkers, but still blessed. Point number 3 this morning. He has a discouraging home life. He's got a discouraging society. Point number 3, he's got a discouraging religion. First, he's got a bad message. You think about that. Let's go back to the very first dreams that he has. Right? He has dreams, and he says he sees that his brothers are going to one day bow to him. And Joseph, being a child and maybe not knowing better, some people think that he's bragging. I don't get that impression. Joseph goes up to his older brothers and he says, "Hey, you guys are going to one day bow to me." What do you think how do you think the brothers felt whenever they heard that? Joseph's already the favorite child, right? What does he have to show that he's the favorite child? Coat of many colors, right? So Joseph's already the favorite child for no apparent reason, and yet Joseph says, "Hey, you guys are going to one day bow to me." Yeah, probably the brothers don't really like that. So what did they do in order to get back at Joseph? What did they do? Yeah, well, they make fun of him. They sell him into slavery and all that, They sell him into slavery. They fake his death. Man, that's a bad message with bad results right there, isn't it? Okay, we fast forward to Potiphar's house. God has told Joseph and all followers of God, "Thou shalt not commit a fornication, thou shalt not commit adultery." Okay, so now we've got a lady who wants to commit adultery with Joseph. But what does Joseph do? Does he hold to his religion, or does he commit adultery? Stands strong. Holds to his religion. And what does he do? What happens to him for standing strong, for following God? He's thrown into prison. That's a bad message and a bad result, isn't it? Okay, now we fast forward. Now he's in prison, and now he's talking to these 2 fellows. He tells one, he gives one of them a terminal diagnosis. You're going to die in 3 days. Man, that's hard, isn't it? No doctor likes to give that diagnosis. No one likes to hear that diagnosis. And so Joseph, he's got a bad message. And then he also tells the butler, he says, hey, here's some good news. You're going to be restored to your butlership in 3 days. Just remember me. And what happens? Does he remember him? Bad message, bad results. Bad message, bad results. Bad message, bad results. Now we come to Pharaoh. Pharaoh's had 2 dreams. Pharaoh has had a dream that essentially says this is the interpretation. So there's going to be 7 years of plenty, and then there's going to be 7 years of famine. Everything's going to be wiped out. How do you think Joseph felt whenever he learned that there was going to be 7 years of famine? You think he was excited to go tell Pharaoh that? Anybody want to go have a face-to-face conversation with Joe Biden and tell him that he's going to ruin the country in 7 years, that he's going to be over the country for 7 years in which everyone's going to starve to death? Anyone want to go tell Joe Biden that? No, we don't want to go share that message. And especially in Egypt, what do you think? All right, Pharaoh, for his birthday, killed a man. What do you think is going through Joseph's mind when he's presenting this message? Yeah. Bad message, bad results, bad message, bad results, bad message, bad results. Now he's got another bad message, and what do you think he is expecting the results to be? Discouraging religion, huh? Bad message, bad results. Anybody have the right to be angry? It was Joseph. But what did he do? He told Pharaoh the dream. What strength must have been characteristic of Joseph to do that?
Well, he had the right to be angry. He had the right to be scared.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. He.
He'll say his faith was with him the whole time.
Oh, yeah.
When he was very, very young,
Yes.
he might not have understood that.
Right.
That's why God stayed with him, because of his faith.
That's right. That's I call it a discouraging religion, but it's not a bad religion, because though all of these things are happening to him, all of these horrible things are happening, what are also happening to him? Second command over Pharaoh's house. Second command over prison. And fast forward a little bit, second command over all of... Joseph had a lot of faith, though he had not a lot of reason to have a lot of faith. Did he? Discouragement. He had a lot of discouragement. But who was encouraging him the whole time? God. Faith. That's right. Oh yeah, he gave him the credit all the way to the end. We'll see that once we get to the final chapter of Genesis. That's right. We'll go from before his birth all the way to Joseph's death this morning. So Joseph, he's got it hard, very, very hard. And if anybody had the right to throw their hands in the air, to be mad at the world, to be angry, to be scared, to not do anything that God wanted him to do, it was Joseph. But Joseph did what? Stayed faithful. Stand strong during discouraging times like Joseph. All right, last thing that we're going to look at, still under that heading of bad religion or discouraging religion. Joseph had bad emotions. Okay, sometimes as Christians we have bad emotions. It's just hard to get up in the morning, and tears are plentiful. We only read of Joseph crying 2 times, but do you think Joseph cried a lot in his life? When he's down in the pit, do you think he's shedding some tears? When he's in the cart, I envision a cart. They may have just drug him behind on a rope, but when he's in the cart of the Ishmaelites, do you think there's any tears? Whenever he's sleeping in Potiphar's house for the first time as a new slave purchased by Potiphar, you think there's any tears that night? When he's thrown into prison for the first time, you think there's any tears? Or whenever he's first framed for trying to sleep with Potiphar's wife, and he's hearing everybody murmur about it, you think he's crying? We only read of Joseph crying 2 times, and that's after he's been elevated to second command over Egypt. And he cries only whenever he sees some people. Who does he see that makes him cry? his brothers, and in particular Benjamin. That's right. Let's go to, let's see. Jackie, could you read Genesis 43, 30 through 31? Genesis 43, 30 through 31. I don't remember who's read and who's not read now, so we'll just let Jackie read, yeah, and then I'll read the rest of them. So,
30 through 31.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Joseph made haste, for his bowels did not yearn upon his brother. For he saw where to weep, and he entered into his chamber and dwelt there. And he washed his face, and went out, and refrained himself, and said, Set on bread.
All right. So he sees Benjamin for the first time. Again, we're skipping a lot of the context. He sees Benjamin for the first time, and when he sees Benjamin, he's got to go and excuse himself so that he can cry. And what emotions welled up within him when he saw that, when he saw his brother. What was the nature of Benjamin's birth? What happened on the day he was born? His mom died. And that's Joseph's mom too, isn't it? That's discouraging as well. So he's got all these emotions tied up with Benjamin. Of course, his mom dying and then not getting to see his brother for years. Now all of a sudden he sees Benjamin. He's welled up with emotions. Let's go to Genesis chapter 44, beginning of verse 27. Actually, Genesis 45, we'll skip a little. Genesis 45, beginning of verse 1. Little context, this is what we just skipped. Judah, one of the brothers, has just given a report to Joseph and mentioned Benjamin, mentioned their father. And at the mentioning of their father, this is Joseph's reaction. Genesis 45, verse 1. Then Joseph could not restrain himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried out, Make everyone go out from me. So no one stood with him while Joseph made himself known to his brothers. He hadn't revealed his identity as of yet. Verse 2, and he wept aloud, and the Egyptians of the house of Pharaoh heard it. Then Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Does my father still live? And his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed in his presence. And Joseph said to his brothers, Please come near to me. So they came near. Then he said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. But now do not therefore be grieved or angry with yourselves, because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. Joseph's very emotional, but despite everything, who does he still look to?
He also sees a big picture.
And that's a hard thing to do, isn't it? That's hard, we as humans, we're just one piece of the puzzle, and it's hard for us to have a bird's eye view of reality. Joseph is very characteristic, very unusual in the fact that he can see the big picture. Yeah, go ahead. 42:24. Maybe there's 3 times when he weeps. 42:24. And he turned himself away from them and wept. And then when he turned to them again, maybe that's the 3rd time. Yeah. So still with all the brothers, and so he cries. He cries 3 times there. 3 times. Yeah. Hard. Yeah. Any other comments right now before we close out this class? We'll close out this class in Genesis 50. Genesis chapter 50. We're going to pick up in verse 20, Genesis 50:20. We're fast forwarding to the end of Joseph's life. They've gotten through the 7 years of famine. All of his family is down in Egypt. This is why there has to be an Exodus 400 years later with Moses. Genesis 50 and verse 20. This is so Joseph's father has just died, and so the 10 brothers come up to Joseph, and what do you think's going through their mind? It's revenge time. Okay, Joseph's been through a lot, and we kind of set him up on this trek. And now that Dad's dead, who's going to stay his hand? Nope, no one. So they come up to Joseph right after Dad dies, and they start begging him for mercy. They say, please don't kill us now that Dad's dead. Genesis 50, we'll start in verse 19, actually. Genesis 50, verse 19. Joseph said to them, do not be afraid, for am I in the place of God? But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is this day, to save many people alive. That's that bird's eye view that Joseph had. So wonderful that he had that. Now, therefore, do not be afraid. I will provide for you and your little ones. And he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. If anyone had the right to be bitter against their family, to be bitter against the world, who was it? And what did he do? He forgave them and comforted them. Man, stand strong in discouraging times like Joseph. Okay, now we come to Joseph's death. Verse 24. Joseph said to his brethren, I am dying, but God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land to the land of which he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Then Joseph took an oath from the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here. So Joseph died, being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. What was his last recorded words? Hope. Yeah, God's going to come and get you out of Egypt, bring you back to the promised land. Hope. Was Joseph faithful unto the end? Which included not being mad at people to the end. You know, a little bit later on in the narrative on Mount Sinai, they'll have the law of that's eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, so on. And Jesus, when he comes into the Sermon on the Mount, he'll say what? Turn the other. That's what God always wanted men to do. When they were reviled, revile not again, 1 Peter. God wants us to stand strong and not turn back and slap someone else.
You know, that forgiving attitude, you see that in Joseph.
Mm-hmm.
And then what does Stephen and Jesus both say?
Mm-hmm. Forgive them, they know not what they do. Yeah. Yeah.
That's the attitude that is throughout the Bible that God wants us.
Right. Yep. That's what God wants us. And Joseph's a perfect example to imitate in that regard. Thank you for class.